Welcome to the Biz Buying Lab. Today we are with Delia and we are going to talk about how to evaluate a listing on the Biz Buy Sell site. If you're like me and you haven't bought a business, you're going to want to learn some tips that we have today to evaluate, look at all the research, and figure out if we want to walk away or investigate more. So, Delia, can you show us what you do when you start looking at the Biz Buy Sell site?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and share my screen in a second. Before I do that, I want to frame it this way. When I started looking for businesses, I felt pretty overwhelmed because I did not know where to start. So I like to use bizbuysell.com as a market research tool. And for people who haven't bought, it's a really good starting point to see what's possible, what's available, and it's one of the steps in the business buyer match analysis that we talk about in our community. So it's not enough to find a good business. You have to find a good business that matches you, who you are, what capital, what DNA you have, operational DNA. So before we do that, like most people don't know what's available, what's possible. That's why we're doing this video. Let me just share my screen. And I'm just going to randomly go through a process, and then I will share with you an AI tool we've built that we are sharing with our students so that this evaluation is easier for new business buyers. Since I'm in California, I put California in here. You can start with all industries, or you can choose the industries you're interested in. I I like to do this every now and then, just see what's available in all industries. I click search, and then I want to have a business that pays me. And that's why I always go to filters and I look for cash flow.
Okay.
It's possible you might miss one or two businesses that have good cash flow because the owner did not put or the broker did not put the cash flow in there. But I just like to make my life easier and choose whatever amount seems reasonable. If you are taking a loan to pay for the business, I would say 200,000 is like the minimum you want. But let's start with $150,000 in SDE or cash flow. And then I don't usually put anything here because I'm more interested in cash flow than anything else.
Okay. I
Um,
have kind of a dumb question because I've never really been on this site very much before. But when they talk cash flow there versus the EBI, the earnings before taxes, do they mean all expenses? Is that what cash flow means,
yeah,
or is that okay?
that's a good question. So SDE stands for seller discretionary earnings. You have the revenue that the business makes after all the expenses, and then SDE also includes whatever the owner pays himself, plus whatever legitimate expenses the owner puts through the business. Those get added back to the profit, and you come up with the SDE. So profit plus owner's pay plus any legitimate expenses the owner puts through the business that are not really needed for the business to run and grow. So it's
Okay.
an interesting number because people have done it in the past where they add too many expenses back. It's like, well, this is a legitimate. I just put it through the business, so you have to be very careful. But
Yeah.
it's think of it as profit, which includes owner's pay. That's probably good. EBITDA is usually used in businesses that are bigger because it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Okay.
And that's important because you want to lower your taxes. That's why you depreciate and amortize your yeah, assets and loans and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So um, yeah, people get confused about it a little bit. But let's say 150,000 is what the profit and the owner pays himself minimum per year. Now
Sounds
I
good.
click filter, and I'm getting some companies. I own a print shop, so I'll probably look at that. I don't want to look at a business I own because I'm going to look at it as I know what the problems are in some of these businesses. So I'll try to see something else that is um, actually we were looking at this earlier, so I'm going to click on it. Absentee run family entertainment franchise, I guess. This person doesn't really know how to spell very well. So when I start, this is what you see: a title, the area, a picture, and these are the numbers that matter. I also want to see, is this listed by a broker or by the seller? Why does it matter? If the seller is selling it, maybe they're more open to creative ways to buying the business. If a broker is involved, he's going to want to get the most amount of money, and they start higher. I mean, it's a generalization. I know it's not going to apply to everything, but brokers are going to start higher, and sometimes they lower the price. They're trying to get as much money because they get a commission on the amount.
Right.
And
When you first see that asking price, how much, is that kind of the set price, or is there any wiggle room with that? Or do you feel like when there's a broker involved, not as much as when there's, for sale by owner, just that price, is that a hard number in your experience?
No, I mean, no asking price is going to be a hard number. There's always negotiation involved. Um, but if a broker is involved, the negotiation is a bit harder. Now, as a first-time buyer or a second-time buyer, most of the first, second-time buyers have not really negotiated a lot with
Mhm.
business sellers, with brokers. The broker is a professional. Like, I mean, most of them are. So they've done this for a while. That's why you have to be careful, right? When you get into negotiations, you have to know what you're doing, what you're asking, what you're saying. But it's not a hard number. It's what they would like. The broker has evaluated the business using whatever method they use, and they're saying this is the value of the business. So let's get into it. This is what they're asking. Cash flow again, SDE is 189,000. And if you hover over this question mark, it actually gives you more details. Arrived at by starting with your net profit, then add back in any payments made to the owner, interest and other depreciation of assets. And then they have those both numbers. EBITDA is 129,000. The gross revenue is close to 1 million, and you can see here 2004. Then you have a business description, and I always read the business description. And then you have detailed information. Inventory 1,500, furniture, fixtures, and equipment 75,000. Usually the FF&E are included in asking price. Employees, 1 full-time, 15 part-time. So that's interesting. You only have 1 full-timer. Growth and expansion, there, anytime a broker is involved, they're gonna give you an idea of how this can grow and expand. SBA approval pending. So that means they're going through the process to get the SBA approval. It doesn't really matter because the seller, I'm sorry, the buyer is the one who gets the SBA loan, so it's tied really to the buyer. But it's still a good sign if they're trying to get SBA approval. SBA approval tends to be higher than what I would pay on some of the businesses. Um, and I've seen that happen with a couple of the businesses. Even one that I bought, the SBA said, "Oh, it's up to this amount." I'm like, "This business is not worth that much." So you have to be careful with those numbers if you're a newer buyer. It's
Yes.
a franchise. So let's talk about a business that's not a franchise, a business that's a franchise.
Mhm.
Franchises have SOP, standard operating procedure. So if someone is new, buying a franchise is not like a terrible idea because you have training, you have
Yeah.
someone who's helping you. And now if you're buying a franchise that is making money, you get the benefits of both world. You know, the franchise world, you get the support, and then you also get the cash flow. You're buying cash flow. So it's not a bad idea, but if you are like me, I don't really like to be told what to do and to given a box, and it feels like I cannot do what I want, which is not true most of the time. You can still do plenty with a franchise. But that's something to consider for a newer buyer. If you have no experience running a business, buying a franchise that's making profit is not a bad idea. Just keep in mind that you are going to pay a percentage per year out of your revenue for the support you get. Something
True.
to keep in mind. Take care of family member. I like to always check the reason for selling. If they are close to retirement age, is that makes the seller motivated, and we love motivated sellers. This one is also makes the seller pretty motivated, taking care of sick family member. But you never know, right? The reality behind the reason for selling. They have to they usually put something here. This business is an established franchise. The rent is really high. So this is something important to keep in mind. So now this is the listing. When I look at this, I want to you always want to see what's the multiple, right? They're saying the cash flow is close to 200,000. They want 600,000. A three multiple for a small business that is absentee run is not bad. So usually you multiply the SDE to 2 or 3 or 4. That's the multiple you tend to pay for smaller businesses. If the more the owner is involved in the business, the lower the value of the business is. The fact that
Okay.
this business is absentee run makes it it's a good sign. It means someone else is running the business. However, if you remember here, you have employees, 16, one and full-time, 15 part-time. That's pretty interesting. Is the full-time the manager? How do you run a business with 15 part-timers? I don't know. Maybe it works. It's California as well. So that's also important to keep in mind with California and employees, they're pretty high taxes. It's very interesting to me that they only have one full-timer, 15 part-timers.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, notice, I think as a first-time buyer, there is some intrigue and also a little bit of nervousness when you see an absentee run business. I think that's obviously the dream, probably for most people. But like later down in the description, I think it said something along the lines of, um, I don't see where it is now, but something about like if you are more hands-on, there'd be more growth potential, that kind of thing. So at what point? I guess what should be some questions that we should ask as we kind of start to evaluate this, or if we want to take this further and we actually start talking to the broker, figuring out how many hours the owner actually is involved or those kind of things. I guess I'm just curious, is it a good idea to buy an absentee run business the first time or not?
Um, I mean, it's great if you find a business that's run by a team. Now, I bought several businesses, and in each case, um, that's seen as a positive sign, but I had to fire the manager because they didn't do a good job, and we had to get involved. You could say, well, you didn't buy the right businesses. Probably true. I mean, it was my first 2, 3 deals were a bit rough. So the seller said, right, this is a team. This team runs a business. So it's almost absentee run. But then when we got to interview the employees, we realized we had to fire the manager pretty quickly, at least in one business. In the other one, we took a little bit longer to fire the manager, and it was the wrong decision. We should have fired him faster. We lost quite a bit because we didn't fire him earlier. So I don't put much stake into it. I mean, it's great if you have a team running it. That's the ideal. When I buy businesses, I don't really want to operate. So I'm looking for a team. It's always important to have people. Otherwise, you're buying a job. And that's okay too. If it's your first deal and you want to learn an industry, it's okay to buy a job. But make sure you're aware of what you're getting yourself into. And the other thing that's important is to understand how much you're left with if you buy this business. So they're saying the business makes 189,000 and they're asking for 600,000. The SBA loan covers like 90% of the purchase price, and then usually the buyer has to come up with 10%. That 10% can be 5% that the buyer puts down. You can have an investor put down the 5%, and the other 5% could be a seller note, like the seller is giving you a loan for 5% to make it easier for you to get the loan. And the changes for SBA loans have from last year make it a bit more difficult with the seller notes, but it's still possible. So then if you have a loan of 540,000, let's say, on this business for a payment for 560K, I'm not sure if I'm correct in saying that is close to like 7,000 a month. I would have to calculate it. And if you're making, close to 200,000, you're paying 85 to 100,000 for the loan, there's not a lot left over. What if something happens? What if something breaks down? Um, so that's something to keep in mind. And we also have a calculator we're going to share with people, so you can put in, right, the purchase amount, what you're putting down, and then you can get an idea of what the SBA loan is. Now that number kind of changes based on the interest, right? Because the interest makes a big part of the loan, but people can at least get an idea of it.
Yeah, so looking over this site, would you say this is something you would want to just walk away from, or you want to ask more questions about, or like it's a go as far as, what would determine in your mind some of those key things as far as deciding if you'd want to do this or
Yeah.
not?
I don't love the purchase amount, what they're asking for it. It feels problematic. I mean, it feels a little high for a couple of reasons. But I'll go through this Claude evaluation, and I know it's really small. I can just copy it and put it in the YouTube description. Um, in here, you can see some positives that it identifies. Let's see if I go here, 22-year-old franchise. A business that has been around for a while is great. So anything that's 10 years or older, that's a great sign. Absentee structure in place, we talked about it. It's pretty good, but you might have to make quite a few changes. SBA pre-approval pending, it's a positive signal. Doesn't mean much to me. Reason for sale, it's a plausible one, but it's important because motivated sellers are more open to negotiate. Now, what's setting off alarms? And I agree with this evaluation. Location confusion, it says Orange County, but then the body says Alpine County, and that's a small area. So that's interesting. There
Mhm.
are typos throughout. Um, that's very interesting. I don't, that wouldn't keep me away from finding more information about it. Absentee for 18 months. Um, Brokers tend to put these phrases in that they think are positive, would get people interested, but they don't really mean much to me until I ask questions and I really see if it's true. In several cases where I actually ended up buying the businesses, it wasn't necessarily true. It was close to the truth, but not really. So I don't really put much stake into what the broker says. FFP, this is an important point. The furniture fixtures for an entertainment center, that's pretty low. That means you might have to invest quite a bit of money. Like in one of our businesses, a machine that cost like $100,000 broke down in the first 6 months. It didn't make sense to keep repairing it every 2, 3 months. So for a business where the actual equipment matters a lot, trampolines, inflatables, like that's the business, they don't have a lot of value in it. So it's interesting. What exactly do they have? It sounds like you might have to invest money into it. Franchise transfer. Whenever you buy a franchise, you have to go through approval process with the franchisor. So the franchisee, the buyer, has to get approved by the franchisor. That is important to know. And you also pay a franchisor like fee, the franchisee transfer fee. And those fees are not small. I
Right.
don't think that's included in the purchase price. That's usually not included. So that means you're going to pay even more. SD margin of 19% is okay, not great for a service business. 20% is not too bad. No lease information. Actually, there was the rent was there, 12,000. But this type of business, the lease matters a lot, right? The location matters a lot. So that's something you would have to ask questions and get details on. So I really like, and then this tool also gives people questions or things to think about, pre-NDA question. In the process of buying a business, you evaluate it and then you ask the broker for an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. You sign it. You say, "I'm not going to share stuff about this business with people," and then you review it, and then you ask questions. Sometimes brokers want to have a conversation with the potential buyer. to interview them, make sure they're a legitimate potential buyer, and then they give you the financial stuff and more things like that. So these are some questions, right, that are important. Now, this is the way I built this skill within Claude is to give people a verdict, just as a conditional verdict. Don't ever take AI verdicts, right, as law. It's just a suggestion.
Mhm.
Conditional interest worth an NDA if the broker handles your questions credibly. A lot of times I just get the NDA if I'm interested because the additional documents you receive after give you a lot of information. The case for pursuing this further. It's old, established. The SDE is reasonable. It's a reasonable starting point. The concerns is revenue SDE actually stable or quietly declining? Does the absentee story survive contact with the actual labor cost of a real GM? So there's only one full timer. Like, I don't understand exactly how this business is run just yet. What does
Right.
franchisor transfer fees cost? So you can see how there's a few issues that we uncover by just looking at the listing. We have not even received like the summary of the business and other things from the broker. And at least this tool signs like underlines the sloppiness in the listing, the location inconsistency, typos. That's interesting. Why would a broker should be a professional? What's going on here? It's just an interesting question to ask. But in looking at just one listing, we uh, pull so much information just from the listing by just looking at a few numbers.
Yeah.
So the benefit of going to Biz by Sell is to look at several listings. And if someone is interested in one industry, let's say HVAC, I want to
Mhm.
look at 6 to 10 businesses at the same time, even if they're out of state, they're not in my location. When you analyze several at the same time, you see patterns. You start to understand the businesses a bit better. So first, right, do market research, just see what's out there.
Mhm.
Then second, if you are interested in a specific industry, then evaluate more businesses in that specific industry. It would give you a lot of good information.
Yeah, that's awesome. So helpful. Once you decide, okay, you want to pursue this one, you want to find out more information, you contact the broker. Is that the first thing you do? At what point, maybe should you talk to a CPA or a lawyer or someone else to
Yeah.
help give you insight? At what point would you want to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the contacting the broker is really easy. You put your information here, and in the optional message, you can say, "Please send me the NDA. I'm interested in finding more." That's all you need to do. You can say more things like, "I have the funds. I'm a serious buyer. I'm ready to buy a business in this industry." Like, but usually, if it's a broker is involved, if you ask for the NDA, you type it in, and they will send you. Uh, the information to your email. So that's the
Okay.
first step. And it's really easy. There are times where when I'm in search mode, I get NDAs from like 10 or 20 brokers and start analyzing things and start comparing things between businesses. Super simple process. Attorney, CPA, I would not get those involved until much further down in the process. There are steps in this process, but you don't have to worry about that just yet. It also depends where you're at in the process, right? As a buyer, are you in the finding a business stage? Like, I don't even know what I want to buy, or are you already decided? So that also determines the answer and what path you should take. But for this video, we assume that people are thinking about potentially buying. They don't know exactly where to start. So our suggestion was use BizBuySell as a market research tool. Just see what's out there, see what the numbers look like, and get some more information before you go to the next step.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you're interested in getting more great tips on how to buy your first business, hit the subscribe button and we'll see you next time on Biz Buying Lab.